Hello everyone, welcome back. Continuing on with my series called the 20-Year Film Fest, where I recommend 14 titles from each of the last 20 years. That's basically 2 weeks worth of movies per year if you watch one per night. A little film festival for each year. Continuing on again with 2005, I already did 7 titles from 2005, and now here's another 7. First, Jarhead, the movie that's based on the a nonfiction book by Anthony Swafford, a Marine scout sniper in the Desert Storm. Or was it Iraqi Freedom? No, it was Desert Storm, right, 91, exactly. He wrote the book, and it was adapted into this film, directed by Sam Mendes, of course, the director of American Beauty and Road to Perdition, and Skyfall, and the next James Bond movie, Spectre, right, exactly. So, yeah, this is really good. There were a lot of reminders of Full Metal Jacket in this movie for me, and you know, that was one of the reasons maybe why I like it, because I love Full Metal Jacket. Terrific movie. Swafford's played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and his partner, the spotter, he is the shooter, he is the guy with the rifle. His spotter, his teammate, essentially, is Peter Sarsgaard. And Jamie Foxx is also in this movie as their commander. And Chris Cooper, who is also in American Beauty, is in the film as well. Yeah, it's just a really good movie. A good look at what life is like for these guys, living in the desert, adapting to the rather harsh conditions, and being frustrated at not being able to actually go out and kill the enemy. They just basically sitting around most of the time, trying to keep themselves busy. Good movie, real good movie. Next, I'd like to talk about a funny little documentary called The Aristocrats. It was directed by Paul Provenza, and it was associated with a few other comedians. They were sort of working together to put together a whole compilation of well-known comedians and maybe some not well-known comedians talking about this one particular joke called The Aristocrats. It starts off with the joke itself starts off with a family walking into a Hollywood talent agent saying, "We've got a family act for you." And then the comedian basically describes the most disgusting, perverse behavior between these family members as part of their act. And the punchline apparently is, "What do you call this group?" And they say, "The Aristocrats." Apparently it's sort of a dig at highfalutin, you know, pinky up types. But the whole point of the documentary, and the joke itself, of course, is for whoever is telling the joke to put their own personal stamp on it, to make it as twisted or as distinctively disgusting and perverse as humanly possible. And there's some really, really wild versions of this joke in the film. Some people don't like the joke, some people think that it's stupid, other people just relish the ability to tell it. In particular, guys like Bob Saget and Gilbert Gottfried are telling some pretty amazing versions of the joke. George Carlin does a really sort of simple version of it, but he takes it really seriously. He doesn't really crack a smile. He tells it very, very deadpan, which is a lot of fun. And there's also a version as animated by the South Park guys, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Fun movie, really, really fun movie, and good for a good you know, some gross out ideas, more than a few. I actually sort of came up with my own version of the Aristocrats joke, but I am not going to tell it because it would really, really offend some people, I think. Now, moving on to Serenity, which is the first feature film directed by Joss Whedon. It is, of course, the sort of big screen spin-off of his TV series Firefly. Of course, I'm a longtime Joss Whedon fan, became a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer during its 4th season, and went back and rewatched all the previous episodes and watched it all the way till the end. And Firefly was a show that I wasn't really impressed with at first, but then I found out the episodes were actually shown in the wrong order. They didn't even air the pilot, the first episode to begin with. They aired like the 3rd episode first, you know, just because they thought it had more action or something like that. Anyway, I really didn't get into it when I first saw it, but then I caught up with it on Sci-Fi Channel reruns, excuse me, before the movie came out, and the movie is one of the best. I think it's probably the best film that he's directed so far. Better than the Avengers, actually. It's maybe a little bit simpler than that, obviously, but you still have a big ensemble cast that has to be juggled in other little various storylines. Of course, characters like the Adam Baldwin, Jane, and you know, maybe some of the other supporting characters don't have the sort of backstory that sort of really becomes important in a feature film, which is tries to function both as a standalone sci-fi adventure story as well as a satisfying conclusion to the series, which was cut off after like 11 episodes or so. I really, really like it a lot. It's great. And I think that Nathan Fillion, along with James Marsters, is like they're like two of the best guys to speak Joss Whedon dialogue throughout all the stuff that Joss Whedon has done in his career. So yeah, Serenity, decent flick. Although I do recommend watching the series just so that you have a greater appreciation of the characters. You can watch the film all by itself. I'm sure you'd find it fun if you haven't seen the series, but I recommend watching the series just, because it would be better that way. Moving back to Jake Gyllenhaal, he was in another very highly acclaimed movie in 2005 called Brokeback Mountain. I'm sure you've heard of that. The late Heath Ledger, of course, played the other guy who is hired to tend to some sheep for Randy Quaid over the course of several months. At that time, they begin an affair. And then are separated once the job is over. Heath goes on to marry his longtime girlfriend, played by Michelle Williams, and the two, of course, became a couple in real life and had a daughter. And Jake meets Anne Hathaway and ends up marrying her. And so the movie is basically sort of like looking at sort of the long-term consequences of having to keep their relationship secret, because they end up getting back together again. They mail each other, and then they go back to basically the same sort of campground and spend like the weekend together, telling their wives and everyone that they're just basically going fishing when actually they're, having sex the whole time. It's a sad movie. It's a pretty sad movie, and I'm not 100% sure it deserved Best Picture, but I certainly think it deserved it more than Crash. I didn't like Crash very much. Crash is sort of a blunt instrument, whereas Brokeback Mountain is a bit more reserved, I guess you could say, a bit more subtle. And I talked to one person who thought that there would be a lot more focus on their relationship and a lot more scenes of them together throughout their lives. But the story really isn't about that. It's more about the pain of being apart and having to keep this relationship secret. So yeah. Good movie, not necessarily my favorite movie of the year, but it's pretty high up there. Then there's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang was directed by Shane Black. Shane Black is a guy I've been a fan of for quite some time as a screenwriter. My favorite script of his prior to this was The Last Boy Scout, which was made in 1991. It starred Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans. It's sort of a buddy flick, but a little bit more violent and nastier than the usual. He also wrote Lethal Weapon and Long Kiss Goodnight, which I don't like as much, but this is definitely, I think, the best movie that he's been involved with. Robert Downey Jr. is the main character, and of course Downey decided that Shane Black ought to direct Iron Man 3, which turned out very well. I liked Iron Man 3 a lot. Downey plays basically a small-time hood, a thief, a criminal, who gets mistaken for an actor when he stumbles into audition while he's running from the cops. And then he gets hired to go out to Los Angeles and go to essentially private eye school. He's working with a character named Perry, played by Val Kilmer, who's a private investigator, and is basically showing him a little bit of what a private eye does so he can prepare for this part that he's supposedly been cast in. In the meantime, he gets involved with Michelle Monaghan, who's like a friend from when they were little kids, and her problems in dealing with her sister and the trouble that she's gotten into, and this whole sort of complicated mystery that really gets almost too complicated to follow fully. But it's a fun movie. It's a lot of fun, and I just love Shane Black dialogue. He's great at it. And I'm looking forward to seeing his next movie, which is called Nice Guys. It has Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe in it. That's going to be pretty cool. As I believe it's like Cops in the 40s or something like that, sort of an LA Confidential type thing. I really don't know. I'm not sure about that. But, since Shane Black is doing it, it's something of interest to me. Now, one movie I think that possibly did deserve Best Picture more than any other is George Clooney's second film as a director, Good Night and Good Luck. I'm also a big fan of the film that he made a few years earlier called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, which I talked about in one of my previous videos. Good Night and Good Luck is, of course, about Edward R. Murrow, the television journalist played by David Strathairn, who begins this sort of crusade against Joseph McCarthy. A very, very restrained crusade, actually. Everybody's very, very calm when they talk about these things, but the passions are running high because this is the Red Scare. It's a time when everyone and their brothers being accused of being a communist and being blackballed and not being able to find employment, what have you. And so Murrow is one of those guys that says, hey, this is wrong what this guy McCarthy is doing. He's whipping up a lot of paranoia unnecessarily, and we should call him out on it, you know. But that's dangerous because, you know, when you argue against somebody like McCarthy, at this time, you were essentially arguing against America. You know, it's like McCarthy, he's anti-communist and he's going to weed out all the communists. So if you're against me, you're against America. So it's sort of a dangerous time to be speaking out in. But he spoke out anyway, and we're all the better for it. Clooney, of course, plays Fred Friendly, his right-hand man. And there's also a lot of really good character work. Downey is in this movie as well. He is one of the guys basically working on Murrow's crew. Jeff Daniels is in the movie, Patricia Clarkson, and Frank Langella plays the head of the network. I love Frank Langella. He's got this very, very deep, authoritative voice. It's just a lot of fun to listen to. Finally, last movie I'd like to recommend from 2005, and those of you who know me would probably, you know, guess in a millisecond that I talk about this movie. The most satisfying comic book character movie I've ever seen, Batman Begins. This was the Batman movie that I've been looking forward to seeing all my life, but wasn't even aware of it. It's the one that handled his origin story really, really well, and has a fantastic cast and just is exciting visually. It's well-paced. It's just an awesome, amazing movie in and of itself, regardless of whether or not it's a Batman origin story, because, you know, I mean, it is just in and of itself a really, really terrific movie. One of the best I've ever seen. It's in my top 20 of all time. And I've already talked about that quite a lot on my channel, so I'll just leave it at that. And y'all are familiar with the movie anyway, I'm sure. So that's 2005. Those are my recommendations, and I will be back in the next video starting in on 2006, which is another pretty remarkable year. Not so much for the movies I was looking forward to, but the movies that came out. I was just like, whoa, I can't believe this year. It's amazing. Looking back on it, it's pretty exciting. I'll see you then. Thanks very much. Thanks for commenting and watching and visiting my Facebook page. Appreciate it very much. See you again soon. Bye.